The Missouri National Guard is moving into Ferguson, Missouri by order of their governor, and I'll read this order here. After a day of marches, the Reverend dr-al-sharpton was there. They had a unity meeting in Ferguson. They had been marching there. This would have been day 7, but tonight it turned ugly. And there is always a situation in these events. Dr. King had the same problem when he was marching in Memphis, Tennessee, on behalf of, at that time, sanitation workers. And there were criminal elements that filtered in and disrupted the march. Now, these people were inspired by law enforcement themselves. Now, we don't know in Ferguson if law enforcement's behind some of these people that were advocating violence, but the situation is that you have various groups, opportunists that come in and use the event for their own purposes, or criminals that see something to prey upon, shops. They are also in the mix. But one of the more troubling and frightening situations is that when these elements, the provocateurs, are under state sanction. Now, who the state is, very difficult to say right there. We may or may not ever find that out. But nonetheless, as one would say, the playhouse will be closed. Because when the guard gets there, first of all, they'll come with overwhelming force, bayonets there. And they'll have their 45 caliber guns if they need them, armored cars. They will close down various thoroughfares. They will require ID of people, and they will guard businesses 24/7. You can bet on that. And I saw one thing there that the anti-democracy people want out. Well, part of the problem here is that you have to look at how the average citizen views this. Many people are sympathetic, no doubt, to Mr. Brown and being literally brutally murdered by this police officer, and they've seen the various problems with the Ferguson PD. There's a long history of that. But at the same time, you have situations where you have various little groups and people that speak for some groups. We don't know if they were sanctioned by them or not. There was an FBI thing, no doubt, put out by the Ferguson PD to watch certain elements of what is called the new Black Panther Party. Now, was that officially sanctioned by the new Black Panther Party? It's very, very doubtful. Now, if this individual, we don't know if he is a principal or organization or just said he was. But this is what you run. And then you had other groups that came in that have 6 or 10 members that wanted to, as they say, assert themselves, do a little building, get a little publicity. But it's a very, very tricky situation. Those of us that were around in the 60s and 70s, anytime you move into any town, I remember H. Rap Brown got caught up in a false charge of that in Maryland. They call it inciting a riot. Now, that is something they can throw upon you if you mention certain words, phrases, etc., and they would attribute these to you. Does that mean that you actually incited a riot? No. You made a speech, as he made a speech. But at the same time, the conditions were ripe. The provocateurs came in, and thus, here you are. So what I would say to people that listen to this, be very, very careful about Ferguson, Missouri, because it is very hot now. Be very careful about what you say. Now, obviously, you have your freedom of speech, but you are not on the Bundy farm out in Nevada. There, they could rebel against the government, say what they basically wanted to say. They got their guns out and all that. Now, these people in Ferguson, they said some gunplay there, no doubt. But people all over America are armed and well armed. And if any of these militia types were in there, or tea parties, or whatever appendage they want to put on themselves, there would have been some shooting, but a totally different response. The sheriff out there of Las Vegas County did not respond. There were helicopters in the air. He had a SWAT team there, but they did not come up there with vehicles. They could have, with gas, and disperse those characters, because the characters were ready to use their guns, and they didn't want to slaughter a bunch of women and children. Now, the situation there in Ferguson, there has been no mass slaughter except for Mr. Brown. He was slaughtered, and some people were beaten. They threatened reporters and evidently threatened to beat some reporter tonight. Those things will actually happen. You'll have that as a backdrop. But the point we're trying to make here is this is a long process. The Michael Brown case has been effectively federalized. The FBI is on the scene, and no doubt they're on the scene watching everything now. And in the age of CCTV, there are TV cameras everywhere. And some of the people that were involved in the looting, etc., they will be looking for them. And if they have not left town, they will get them. So the whole point is that they bring in the police state. Will it last forever? No. The Michael Brown case, eventually the district attorney there, who is a racist, will come up with a verdict one way or the other. Whether it'll be up or down, maybe he'll take it to a grand jury, and the grand jury could say no indict, and that'll be the end of that. Then it's the federal case that they are building the evidence, second autopsy performed. This is extraordinary in these cases. Now, not to say that it should be in many of the cases, but you have to understand, we work on basically what the law we have. And it's a primitive situation, but the city of Ferguson is primitive in that it transposed from a white flight community. There was some mention of where the police officer Wilson lived, evidently a church next to his house. They were afraid somebody would, invade that while they were in there praying for Wilson. One does not know where those prayers were going, perhaps not above the roof of the so-called church, but nonetheless, those are some of the facts of the matter. As far as Wilson, he will not be back in Ferguson anytime soon. More than likely, he will just quietly transfer to some other jurisdiction in some other town, and he will be a forgotten figure unless he's in jail. But that is a long ways from today. We have to look at this from a strategic point. You'll hear from Dr. and also some of the program Face the Nation, where people were there talking about this, including Nixon. Now, one of the things I did notice that Captain Johnson, his name Johnson. Jackson is the Ferguson police. Mix them up there, it would be malpractice, actually. But nonetheless, Captain Johnson went out and said, and they asked him some questions, and he said, well, they were making some tactical shifts, saying that their headquarters had almost been overran. Now, that in itself is kind of doubtful. They had enough police force there. You can figure they had probably 100 coppers and their armored vehicles out there, could handle anything that they really needed to handle. This is more of a political situation for old Jeremiah and Nixon. He decided, well, he'd send the National Guard. There was a discussion a few days ago on Facebook. Some lady was saying, had they sent them yet? And somebody was saying, well, it's being contemplated. There's no doubt about that. They probably wanted to send the National Guard from day one, but they would go through this to say, well, we bent over backward, and now the camel's back, the straw that broke the camel's back is there, when they said some additional looting. The fact of the matter is there's very few things left around that are loot anymore, and they aren't looting the big box stores. They said a Domino's Pizza and some other lesser things. They even said that some people were trying to overrun Mickey D's, and the people locked themselves in. They didn't break the glass. The police got there immediately. It's interesting to me, with as many police as they had, why did they not have a police officer type in all those establishments that are open just to be there? They did not. So that's kind of inviting this. There are ways of doing these kind of things. One police officer in Mickey D's would have pushed the crowd around because they'd have been on the radio, and then all those cars would have came flying, but yet the only one left there were the workers. People, no doubt, that live in Ferguson and look like them. So a lot of things have not been answered yet. Do not jump to conclusion that all of a sudden all these marauders were running through Ferguson. People have been demonstrating there for a week now, and in proportion to the situation, there had been very little violence. Now, on Saturday night, evidently somebody was shot, but that was not connected with this particular situation. People are shot on Saturday nights in many places and in many cities. And so again, this is over the top. There'll be analysis of this tomorrow, as the tanks and used to be people dressed in green with helmets. Now I guess they're in desert camouflage. They will come in, men and women. And let's just say they are not the people that, by and large, are the team, are part of Team Ferguson. In fact, they are part of Team Buchanan, no doubt. And they probably have, most of them, the same leanings that those people were demonstrating in downtown St. Louis, outside of a TV station. They had some police type there were talking about the police and how they give orders. And one fellow said he was stopped because of his tattoos, but he was not stopped because his skin was black. That's a totally different issue. He let him see his pack and let him go. But that's not the situation. Mike Brown evidently had up his hands and he was still killed. So it's a different situation. Let's get this executive order. It's 14-9. Whereas the state of emergency was declared on August 16th due to civil unrest occurring in the city of Ferguson, and whereas the events occurring in the city of Ferguson, Missouri, have continued to create conditions of distress and hazard to safety, welfare, and property of the citizens of the community beyond the capacity of local jurisdictions, that would be the Ferguson Police Department, and I guess he says here St. Louis County, and the patrol units that he'd sent there. Whereas, implication of the provision of Section 44.0.10 through 44.1.3 SRSMO is necessary to ensure the safety and welfare of the citizens of Ferguson. Now, therefore, I, Jeremiah W. J. Nixon, Governor of the State of Missouri, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Constitution and the laws of Missouri, including Section 41, order and direct the Adjutant General of the State of Missouri or his designate to forthwith call and order into active service such portions of organized militia as he deems necessary to aid the executive officials of Missouri to protect life and property. It is further ordered and directed that the Adjutant General or his designate, and through him and the commanding officer of any units or any other organizations such as organized militia so-called into active service, take such an action and employ such equipment as may be necessary, that means tanks and what have you, in support of civil authorities. Provide such assistance as may be authorized and directed by the governor of this state. I further authorize the superintendent of the Missouri State Highway Patrol to take such measures, including but not limited to restricting or closing streets, thoroughfares in the city of Ferguson to maintain order and peace. And this order was issued on the 18th of August 2014. Now, when we have these kinds of orders issued, we've seen them before, going back to the 60s in Watts and various other rebellions. In the 90s, again, in Los Angeles, these rebellions move forward. The military is moved in the cooling off period, and then eventually they move out. Local police take back over. Now, Amnesty International is also on the scene. They are monitoring events there in Ferguson. And no doubt FBI agents are all over the place. So there are a lot of people monitoring events there. And they'll figure out what's going on. Let me take one look at the Twitter feed. Then we'll go to Dr-al-Sharpton and some Face the Nation in its entirety, because we have time here. So what I would say to the listeners of iHeartRadio, that basically Ferguson is one of those types of issues that is in flux. It will continue for some time until stability comes about there. The district attorney has not come with a charge from his grand jury. A grand jury is like a yo-yo, and the district attorney is a string, and he either can get an indictment or not get an indictment. It doesn't really matter on that. I'm just looking at my Twitter feed here, and U.S. firms help the spyware industry build a potential digital weapon for sale overseas. This is from